All right, lesson 8. We have got a hard concept to conquer tonight, and so I only gave us a couple different letters to memorize out of the consonants. So for lesson 8, where are my? There we go. We've only got 3 consonants, and they're all basically the same. So we've got pay, fey, and fey sophite. So the only difference in between those two first ones is that one has a dagesh and one doesn't, which means that one of them has the plosive sound while the other one has the fricative sound. And so these are exactly like we would expect them. Pay is the plosive p, p sound, the equivalent of p in English, and fey is the equivalent of f in English, that f sound. So it's kind of hard to delineate any of these ones out, but if we're looking at our kind of grade school book here, fey looks like a face, and then pay looks like that face got a pimple on it. And so those are kind of those silly little characters there, but pay and fey are often confused with chaf and kaf. The difference being that pay and fey have that that nose that comes in there on the side there that we're looking at. Whatever you want to call that, that curves in there. That's very important to distinguish between the chaf and the kaf and the pay and the fey. So if we're taking a look at our ballpoint forms here, those ones that I was just talking about, chaf and kaf, they're basically just the backwards C, very boxy. And then pay and fey have the little 90-degree angle that comes inward. To me, it kind of looks like how you draw kind of that Greek border looking thing where you go out and in and back around. Maybe that's not helpful, but anyway, it's basically chaf and kaf with a little bit of an inward nose there. They're not typically confused with bet and vet, but that's another distinction that you'd want to pull in there. And then fey sophite is going to be the same, except that it drops its tail when it's at the end of the word. So as we take a look at our final forms, this is the 4th one. We're almost done with our final ones. And so we have fey, that when it comes at the end of a word, it drops its tail, just like chaf does, but pay has that additional nose on it. So one thing that was brought up on our Monday group, that's a really great point, is that do chaf and kaf, fey and pay all have a final form, or is it just the chaf and the fey? If they had a dagesh, would they still have their final form at the end? The answer is yes. Like very, very, very rarely will you ever see a fey or a chaf at the end of a word with a dagesh. But I mean, there are a couple in the whole language, but it's not common at all. A word will like hardly ever end with a plosive sound. It always ends with that fricative sound, but it's not to say that there's not. So I don't include those in here, but they are possible. But these are going to be the main ones that you would come across all the time and want to memorize is chaf, mem, nun, fe, and tzadi. All right, so I threw these greetings in here in the wrong place. I was planning on doing those at the end, but before I forget about them, let's memorize these. So I've got 4 different greetings that we're so close on. We don't have the sheen yet, and we don't have the resh yet, but I think that it's close enough that we can still memorize them, right? Even if we don't memorize how to write them necessarily, but knowing how to say them. So shalom is kind of like the Hawaiian aloha, right? It's hello and goodbye. but that's not what it means. It means peace. And so it's kind of like God be with you, peace be with you, peace be unto you, kind of a thing. Shalom is the ultimate form of a greeting, and it's the ultimate form of a send-off. And so that's why we say shalom. And then I've got three here. So I've got good morning, good evening, and good night. So good evening kind of doubles for good afternoon. They don't have like necessarily a distinction for afternoon. And so it's going to be morning, anytime that we're kind of splitting up the day into two parts, morning and evening. And then good night is like good night to tuck you into bed kind of a thing. So for good morning, we're saying each of these backwards. We're going to say morning good, or evening good, or night good. So morning is boker. Boker. So I guess we haven't learned kuf either, but it does the k sound, as in a Q or a K type of sound, which we'll learn next week. But I guess there was 3 letters that we haven't learned yet. So we've learned bet, and the vowel holam malay, bo, k, boker. This fly is driving me nuts. I'm gonna be smacking my face all night. Sorry. Boker, tov, tet, holam malay, and vet. Boker tov. Boker tov is a common good morning. So in our Monday classes, I'm going to be starting to try to incorporate this a little bit more. But shalom, boker tov. For this class, I'm going to be saying shalom, erev tov. So erev, we've learned ayin is a silent letter, and so it begins with the vowel sound. E, re, v. Erev tov. Erev tov. Good evening. Shalom, erev tov. But as we say good night, I'm going to be saying laila tov. So we have lamed, and with the patach, lai, with the yod being its consonant form, lai, la, laila tov. Laila tov. Shalom, laila tov. It's going to be kind of our, at the end of our class, I guess, laila tov. So at the beginning, we're going to say erev tov, and at the end, we'll say laila tov. So hopefully those are 4 pretty simple greetings that we can start incorporating, even though we don't quite have all of the consonants learned yet. Shalom, boker tov, erev tov, laila tov.
So is the tov the good
Yes.
part of it? Good, and then we're learning the other things.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with all of their greetings, everything is good. It's not like well or anything. We're always using that good. So tov meaning good. So as we get into the Aleph with Beth, every time that you get an answer right, tov means good job.
Okay.
Yep. Boker tov, erev tov, laila tov. All right. So the Aleph with Bet song. Hopefully it's getting cemented in there, even though we only do a little snippet of it each week. But let me just read through all of the letters here, and then we'll go ahead and sing them. So we've got Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Chaf, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ain, Pe, Fe. All right, so we'll do it in our traditional echo. Maybe we should just do it as a whole, because sometimes it's easier to carry the tune if we're just singing it all together. So let's kind of go through it a little bit slower, not at full top-notch speed, but let's sing it together. So everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. Aleph,
Bet,
Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yod, Haf, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Pe, Fe, Sadi, Kuf, Resh, Shin, Sin, Tav. It's a little bit hard because we got a little bit of a delay on that one. I need to come up with like a better way to sing together, not on Zoom. Anyway, hopefully it's getting cemented in there. We can get that. I find that I'm always going back to the Aleph Bet song to like figure out the placement of things. One of the things that is super helpful is when we get to gematria, which is that Hebrew doesn't have numbers. They don't have like Roman numerals or the Arabic numbers that we use in America today. They use their alphabet. So Aleph is the value of 1, and Bet is the value of 2, etc. And so it's really helpful to have the Aleph Bet song in order in our minds so that we can count with it. Aleph Bet Bet Gimel Dalet He Vav Zayin Het Tet Yod Chaf Kaf, kind of thing. And so that will be really crucial as we go forward with gematria, but it's very crucial in lots of things too. So it's important to get those down. All right, so tonight we are going to be going from kindergarten straight to freshman year of college. But before we do, let's take a look at syllable structure. So this is a review. I can't remember if we did it in week 3 or 4 or something, but in order to understand syllables, we have to understand the grown-up vowel chart. And in order to understand the vowel chart, we've got to understand syllables. So they're very symbiotic. So here are our 3 really basic syllable rules. All syllables begin with a consonant and they have only one vowel. So we'll never, ever, ever see a syllable start with a vowel. It has to start with a consonant, even if that consonant is silent. And so all syllables start with a consonant, and all syllables have a vowel. And the difference between the syllables is if it has a second consonant or not. So let's take a look at some examples of that first rule. So here are some really simplified syllables that begin with a consonant and have a vowel. We've got bet with a kamatz. We've got aleph with a chirik. And we've got gimel with a chirik yod or chirik maleh. So these are all a very specific type of simple syllable, right? So we've got 2 different classifications or types of syllables, an open syllable and a closed syllable. And this is going to be really key when we get to our vowels. So on the left, we have the examples of an open syllable. So it starts with a consonant and ends with a vowel. And so one thing that's really important to note when we look at our simplified vowel chart, we have chirik, but sometimes it has a vowel companion, which is chirik yod. When it's in that vowel companionship, the yod loses its consonant status. It becomes part of the vowel. And so this is technically 1 consonant and 1 vowel. It's not consonant, vowel, consonant. It's just 1 consonant followed by one vowel, so it's considered open. But here on the right-hand side, we have what's a closed syllable, which means that it begins and ends with a consonant and has a vowel smushed in the middle. So here we have bet, hirik, dalet, and aleph, patach, vet. So these are what's considered a closed syllable. So if we have just one consonant and one vowel, it's open, because that vowel is open to fly around. Not really, but like that's why it's open. It's because there's nothing keeping it necessarily in place. And then the closed syllable is where the vowel is sandwiched in between two consonants. It's closed off. It can't move anywhere. All right, so our third syllable rule is that words are always stressed on their final syllables as the general rule. There are exceptions, and we have to mark those exceptions a specific way, but words are stressed on their final syllables. So, for example, this word on the right, well, I mean, it's the same word, but this little accent mark above shows us where the stress is. The stress belongs over the last syllable, not the first syllable. So here we have a, have. Ahav. So when we're pronouncing that correctly, it's ahav. The ha gets the stress. It's that final syllable. Ahav. It wouldn't be pronounced ahav. Ahav would be what this would represent here, and that would be an incorrect way to pronounce that word. So ahav has two syllables. The first one is an open syllable, aleph, with a kamatz. And the second syllable is he, patah, vav. And so we would separate those two out, these two separate syllables, and the final one gets the stress, the accent. So in the case of an exception, an accent is placed over the first consonant of the stressed syllable. So here's an example of regular open and closed and how we would mark them correctly as a stressed open and closed. So in the regular, there's no stress marks, but if it is an irregular syllable that receives a stress when it typically wouldn't, we have to mark it so that we know how to pronounce it correctly. And so the stress mark, it's very crucial that we put it over the first consonant of that syllable. We don't want to put it over the second one, because when we start smushing the syllables together in a long word, then that's going to be really tricky. We want to make sure that we put it over the first consonant of the stressed syllable. We wouldn't want to put it over the second one. All right, so just kind of little quiz, easy softball questions. So is this an open syllable or a closed syllable? We've got one consonant, a bet, and one vowel, which is the kamatz. So this would be an open syllable. Is this one open or closed? We've got a dalet, patach, and a rimel. So this one would be a closed syllable. We've got consonant, vowel, consonant. And this one's the one that's kind of tricky. We have to remember that hirik malay is considered one vowel. And so that yod drops its consonant status because it's a companion vowel. And so, what was that?
It's open.
Yep, so this one is an open syllable. All right, so why syllables? Because this is the hardest part of any language, right? Is learning all of the grammar rules. But syllables are super crucial so that we know where the stress goes. If you've ever had any experience with a speaker a foreign speaker trying to speak English and they put all of the stresses in the wrong places, it almost makes it unintelligible, especially if you're going really fast. And so it's the same with Hebrew. If you're putting the stress in the wrong places, people aren't going to know what you're talking about. They might not even know anyway. And so we want to give ourselves the best shot that we can. And then the second is when we are actually writing or reading the Hebrew, the syllables, if it's open or closed, help us determine the length of the vowel, which we'll see here in a minute. So it's very important. There's two very crucial rules. So let's get a lot of practice. These are the same slides that we covered in a previous lesson, but just to refresh us before we actually go into the vowel chart. So here's our syllable division. Remember, we're going right to left, and these are consonants and vowels. So if we follow our kind of 4-step process, how many syllables are there in this word? Step 1, we separate any 2 consecutive consonants. So we're going to put a little yellow line there. And then we're going to start at the beat. What was that?
I'm talking too much. I said there's 3.
Oh, you're good. So we start at the beginning of the word and work our way left. So we're going to put our second one here. We wouldn't want to put it here in between this C and V, because that would make that last syllable start with a vowel, which is going to break one of the rules. So here's our syllable structure, and we determine the regular placement is to have the stress on the last syllable, unless otherwise noted. All right, so I'm not going to walk through the steps on this one, but how many syllables are in this one? Take a second and take a look at that.
4.
Yeah. All right, so we separate, and we wouldn't want to put one here because that would put the final one with starting with a vowel. So we pop it back, which makes us have 4 separate syllables with the stress on the final. All right, try this one.
Yeah,
3 syllables.
2.
Yeah.
2.
This one's a really common one. We'll see it all the time.
2.
Consonant vowel, consonant vowel.
2.
Yeah, this one's really simple. CVC, CVC.
Oh, okay. 1, 2. Let's see. 1, 4. Great. 4. 4.
Okay, and the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky, isn't it? Especially where we don't have actual letters in there. We just have these C's and B's. All right, so here's the simplified vowel chart. This is the kindergarten, and it's time to grow up. Now we are going to try to ease ourselves into the very complex thing. We're just going to tackle just a small portion of the bigger one tonight. But we've learned all of the vowel sounds, and so it's time to start organizing them and learning why we would use one versus the other. So with that, we need to kind of have a small history lesson. So as we go back and take a look at our first lesson together, we talked about how ancient Hebrew was written, right? Before the Masoretes came along, we have the Torah scrolls, we have the Isaiah scrolls. Anything that's super ancient, there are no vowels. And so as we're looking at pages and scrolls full of consonants, there are three that are called the mother vowels. And those are Hey, Yod, and Vav. Hey, Yod, and Vav are considered vowels most of the time. Anytime that we see one of those, we know that there's a vowel sound that's accompanying it. Very rarely is it not. And so those mother vowels, in order to pronounce the consonant form of them, you have to almost pronounce the vowel that's associated with them. And so hey is associated with the ah sounds. Yod gets associated with the A and the E sounds. And then the Vav is kind of a tricky one because we've always learned it as a Vav. But traditionally, it can either be a Vav or it can be a W. So we have a V and a double V, or what we call a double U for some reason, which is silly because it's a double V. And so this V sound is often a W sound. And so when you see it written out in Hebrew curriculum, you'll often hear it called a wow. Sometimes it's a vav, sometimes it's a wow. But typically, we're going to be, especially with vowel sounds, we're always going to have that W as a vowel. Now, if you, it depends which decade you grew up in American English, but W is often considered a vowel in English as well. But my generation never learned that, and that was very odd to me when I heard that W was considered an American vowel. But anyway, beside the point, I digress. Mother vowels. We have these three mother vowels. And if we kind of take a look at some English examples of these, let's take a look at the word mahogany. Can you pronounce the hey or the H sound without a vowel? Mahogany, like it's just impossible. And so in order to get that consonant, you have to have the vowel sound with it. The same kind of goes with kayak. I mean, we could go kyak, and just kind of put almost like an apostrophe in there, but to get the full Y sound that it makes there, kayak, you have to have the vowel sound accompanying it. And then microwave, like in order to cancel out that O, it's almost impossible. And so these are not the greatest examples, but trying to transfer it over into English is kind of difficult. But anyway, so we've got three mother vowels, and they're starting to kind of differentiate and hook up with specific vowel sounds. So here's going to be our full-on this fly driving me nuts. So the hey is always associated with the ah sounds. The yod is kind of associated with two different sounds, the A and the E sounds. And then the Vav or the Wow is associated with the O and the Oo sounds. So that's our columns. The columns in this are going to be the mother vowels. And then our rows of this table are going to be the lengths that each of these possess. So tonight, we're only going to focus on the hey mother vowel, but we're going to take a look at all of its lengths. So historically, as the Masoretes come along and start putting vowel diacritics injecting that into the ancient texts, they maintained the hey along with the kamats. Over time, some of the heys kind of drop out and it just becomes a kamats, but they're both about the length of a half note in music. But then if we're shortening it, a quarter note length of it becomes a patach. And when we get an eighth note sound, I mean the length, it's very short. We haven't learned these three yet, but we'll get to them in a couple of weeks because they carry some different grammatical issues that we'll need to tackle a little bit later. I think it would be too much to really dive into those tonight. So each of these columns have 4 lengths. There's the historically long and the long. There's the short and then the half or the reduced. So basically, just kind of think about it in a musical type sense. We've got half notes, quarter notes, and eighth notes. So here's how they interact with syllables. So remember, we've got 2 types of syllables. We've got open syllables and we've got closed syllables. Do I have? Yes. Let's skip that slide for a second. So when we have an open syllable, the vowel is always going to be the long version. When we have a closed syllable, that vowel in between gets shortened because it's closed, it's squished, and it becomes short. So if we're taking a look at hey in the 2 different vowel lengths and the 2 different kinds of syllables, which one would be which? Where would we put a kamats and where would we put a patach? Would we put the kamats with the open syllable or the closed syllable?
Yeah.
So taking a look at those, kamats is the longer sound of that hey column, right? And so it's going to be associated with the open syllable. The patach is a shorter version of it, and so that one gets squished in between the 2 consonants. So let's take some practice examples here. So step 1, let's determine first how many syllables are in this word. So all of these words, I've cherry picked these ones. They all have 2 ah sounds. And so this word right here is pronounced ahal. Ahal. It means to eat. Ahal. So how many syllables are in this word? Again, if we're kind of going back to grade school, when in doubt, clap it out. Ahal. Ahal. So there's 2 syllables. So if we have 2 syllables, ahal, we're going to be putting vowel sounds underneath both the aleph and the chaf. So we're going to separate our syllable right there in between those 2 consonants, right? So ahal, and we're going to determine which syllable gets the stress. So that's going to be the last syllable. we don't necessarily have to put that mark on there because it follows its normal pattern. But just for the sake of this exercise, we're going to put that stress mark on there to show it. Achal. And then we're going to determine where the patach goes and where the kamatz goes. So is the first syllable open or closed? It's an open syllable, and so it's going to receive the kamatz. And then chal is a consonant, vowel, consonant. So it's going to be a closed syllable. So that one's going to receive the patach. Ahal. Does that make sense? We'll get some practice with it here in a second.
That's cool.
All right, so here's the tricky part. Is the hey a vowel or a consonant? Because historically, if we're taking a look at this chart, the hey comes with the kamatz in the historically long version of it. But we haven't learned that yet. Like we kind of seen that with hirik and some of those other vowels, right? But in this case, it does come together. So this one's just kind of a tricky one to memorize. And so the hey is a vowel companion and it drops its consonant status. So in this version right here, this would be an open syllable. We would have a consonant, whichever consonant that would be in that circle. And then the kamatz hey is considered one vowel. It's kind of tricky to learn it, but oh, and I've got a slide that explains that there. So a closed vowel or a closed syllable and a open syllable. So it could be just a kamatz by itself would be a long version, but also the kamatz hey would also be considered a long vowel or an open syllable. So here's an example of that one. Let's put it right into practice. So this word, try sounding it out there. And I've put, again, with all of these words, the double, both of the vowels are going to be the same. We just got to determine if they're long or short or what. So this is the word ka, la, kala, kala. So how many syllables is this? Ka, la.
Two.
It's the same as our previous one. We're going to split that word up right there. And so determine which syllable gets the stress. Kala. And so it's that second syllable. And then we want to determine long or short vowels. So let's just work on the first one. So ka would be open or closed. That's going to be an open syllable. And so which would it be a patach or a kamatz?
Kamatz.
It'd be a kamatz since it's long, right? Since it's open. And then here, that second one is kind of tricky. So it right here, it looks like it would be consonant, vowel, consonant. But since we have the ah sound, that hey loses its consonant status and becomes a vowel companion with the kamatz underneath there. So this would be written like this. So let me go back to the first one. So we've got a kamatz and then a patach. But here we've got a double kamatz. And we're kind of seeing why that would be. All right, let's do this word. So again, this has the same sound. It's in that ah category. Zavach. Zavach. Zavach means to sacrifice or slaughter. So how many syllables? I think all of these are going to be the same tonight. I'm going to separate it there. which syllable goes to stress. It's the final one. And then they both have the ah sound, but we have to determine which one's long and which one's short, or are they both long, or how does that work? So that first syllable is just one consonant, one vowel, so it's open. And so it's going to receive the kamats. And that second one is a consonant vowel consonant, and it's not going to be one of the vowel companions. That it is only hey is one of the vowel companions there. And so this one is going to be first a kamats and then a patach. Zavach. Zavach.
So what the heck am I even looking at? That's not a hay. That's not a hay. I thought thinking that was a hay.
Oh, yeah. So that's one thing that's kind of confusing, because you're going to see hey, or sorry, het and hey at the end of a word, and you got to make sure that you don't mix the two up.
So that's actually a closed syllable, right?
Yep. So a closed syllable is going to have a shortened vowel sandwiched between the two consonants. Zavach. All right, let's try this one. So 2 syllables. The stress goes on the final syllable. And which vowels? So this is savav. Savav.
So I think that, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got
just like our last one.
Yep, and we'll start kind of seeing a pattern here. Anytime that we have one of these 3 consonant verbs, this one, sorry, is the verb to go around the building, or to go around a rock or the hill or whatever. Savav. So anytime we have one of the 3 consonant vowels or verbs, sorry, there's so many technical terms, my mind's swimming. 3 consonant verbs that have the double ah sound, they're almost always going to be kamats patach. But you know, as we get more practice with them, we'll start seeing that pattern. All right, this is the verb to give birth. It is pronounced yalad, yalad. So we've got 2 syllables. The stress goes on the second one. And we've got a kamats and a patach. Yalad, yalad.
What were you saying on that last thing? Isn't that a dalet?
It's a dalet without a dagesh. And so it's the fricative version, right? So if you had a dagesh, it would be yalad. Yalad. But this is yalad. So you're doing your tongue is in between your 2 teeth. Yalad.
Okay.
All right, and this is the verb to build. It is pronounced bana, bana. So we've got 2 syllables. The stress is on the final. Now, what are the vowel sounds?
Well, a kamats on the first one. But is that, I gotta figure out if that hey is, it loses its sound because it's associated with the vowel, right?
Yes, and it's only going to be the ah sounds that it would do that with. If it was a hirik or an o sound, any of the other sounds, that hey would stay a consonant. But anytime that it's following an ah, if it's a vowel companion with the ah, then it drops its consonant status.
Mhm.
So this is
So
the
that
word
one's
bana.
gonna be a patah. Patat. And the other one's a kamats, right?
No.
The B is the kamats,
Uh-huh.
and the other one is a patah.
It
No?
would be a kamats because the hey is a vowel companion.
Oh yeah. I just I just I thought it through and then I screwed it up.
Yeah. But yeah. So anytime that you have the hey at the end, if it's part of the ah sound, then it's going to be the long vowel sound.
Because it's an open syllable, right?
Yep. Makes it that open syllable.
Okay.
So that chart, there we go.
Yeah.
So that even though it's historically long, it's still going to just maintain that open syllable. So yeah, that's probably the trickiest part of the hey column of the mother vowels is that historically long thing, because there's no really great way to introduce that before now. And so it kind of gets a little tricky, a little bit confusing. So next week, we're going to do all of the yod. We're going to do both columns of the yod. We're going to get practice with all of those ones. And then the following week, as we finalize the alphabet and all of the consonants, we're going to incorporate both of the columns on the vav, the o and the u sounds, and learn how those play into it. So just as a quick review, sorry, this is gonna go fat. Well, let me just scroll to it. So this week, we are just learning basically two consonant sounds. They're both written very similar, right? The pei and the fei. And then when the fei comes at the end, drops its tail and becomes a fei suffix. And then this week we recovered all of the syllable rules, that all syllables begin with a consonant always, and they have at least, well, and they have a vowel, but they may have another consonant. So there's two types of syllables, open and closed. An open syllable is just one consonant, one vowel. A closed syllable is consonant, vowel, consonant. And words are stressed on their final syllables as a general rule. And we don't have to put a stress over the general rules, the ones that follow the rules. But if there is an exception, that we put the accent over the first consonant of the newly stressed syllable. And we'll take a look at that last bullet point next week as we talk about the yod columns. If the last vowel is a sagol, then the stress automatically moves up the word. It comes to the second to last syllable by default. And it's usually marked properly, but sometimes, since it kind of follows that grammatical rule, sometimes they leave off the stress mark, but we'll cover that next week. So those three kind of 4 syllable rules, and then taking a look at the, if I get to it, the mother vowels. So these mother vowels get split into a much more complex chart as we're moving forward. And so let me just show you really quick on Learning Zion, or Learning Zion, where I've got those. So Hebrew Study Group, and then lesson 8, which is this week. I finally have one homework thing on there if you would like more practice. So there's 2 different PDFs here. One is the worksheet and one is the answer key. And so anyway, it gives quite a few words and what their meanings are. And so you're going to determine them just like we did on those final ones today. So you're going to take that and you're going to divide it into syllables, figure out where the stress goes, and then where or which vowels you would use. All of these are going to follow that same structure. I've only included words that have the double ah in it. And so you don't have to worry about hiriks or holams or anything like that. You're just doing ah sounds. And so once you do that, then here's the answer key that gives all of those what the proper structure would be. But that's the only worksheet I've got so far. So next week is going to be the tricky one. So next week, we're still going to do our Monday group, but the Thursday evening group, I have a schedule conflict, and so that one's going to be canceled. So if you want to jump over to the Monday group, that's totally fine. If you just want to watch the recording of the Monday group later on in the week, that's totally fine too. But as far as us meeting at 8 p.m., we will be canceling next Thursday, and then we'll be back the following Thursday. But anyway, just heads up there. I'm going to be presenting on the Bridge Forum. It's a kind of a national family history type Zoom meeting. If anybody's interested in that, you can go to my Facebook page and find the link. But anyway, any questions? Pop quiz. Does everybody remember how to say good evening or good night? Sorry. Let's see. Let me pull up the screen so we can take a look at it, because that's really hard. If I just
I know it's got a tub on the end.
Yep, it's got a 12 on the end. Let's put... Okay, so shalom, goodbye, and then Laila Tov. Laila Tov. So just to kind of review those really quick. So we've got Boker Tov, the morning, Boker. It's kind of like you play poker in the morning. I don't know if that helps you remember it. Boker Tov.
Yeah, I'm going to think of that.
But you try to come up with like absurd things to help you remember, right?
I'm just kidding.
And then Erev Tov is a little bit easier to memorize. Erev, evening, Erev Tov. And then Laila Tov, Laila, I don't know, it's kind of like a lullaby, Laila Tov, which is really beautiful in lots of Sabbath worship songs in Jewish, Laila Tov. There's some beautiful ones. Anyway, so as we bid adieu, would say Shalom, Laila Tov. All right, have a great week, everyone. We'll see you later.
Bye.